We are back and we are on a roll. I think I did an hour and 15-minute show. Took an hour off, talked to my soon to be wife. That's a week away. It's crazy. It's going to be another Lombardi, another one of us in 1 week. I'll obviously be taking May 6th off. But anyway, made the call. And now I'm ready to talk about the 49ers offensive line. Construction of their offensive line, because a lot of people are up in arms over this. They're like, oh, David, the 49ers didn't pick an offensive lineman. What the hell is going on? I thought that we saw these quarterbacks get injured. Shouldn't that have been their priority in this draft? Guys, priorities for team building don't happen over the course of just one draft with a magnifying glass. They happen over the course of several years. And the 49ers have invested big resources in their offensive line, and they're continuing to invest resources there. But you have to understand context. And this is the main context entering this draft and leaving this draft, because the 49ers didn't trade up any higher than number 87. Would have been impossible to trade up higher, probably in the mid-second round, unless they started giving up active assets. And they weren't going to trade Trey Lance. They weren't going to trade Brandon Ayuk. Those were all just stupid rumors. But it is inherently difficult to find plus O linemen later in the draft. And by this, I mean, you can't just expect to throw a bunch of darts at fourth round tackles, fifth round tackles, and say, hey, that's an improvement over Colton McKivitz. Let's go. Colton McKivitz was a fifth round pick back in 2020. He wasn't very good to begin. We're not really sure how good he is now. The 49ers have a lot of confidence in him, but it is clear that he has made progress over his time in the NFL. He's developed. The point being that if you just draft another random fifth rounder right now, it's likelier than not that he's going to struggle through some early time in the league. And you have a loaded roster if you're the 49ers. That's indisputable. This is a loaded roster. So random picks later in the draft are going to have to fight their way through the loaded roster to make the 53-man cut down. That is an inescapable truth. So I wrote on Twitter a little bit ago that this draft has been fascinating for the 49ers. We could look at my little thread here to kind of read through it because of this dynamic. Here we go. I will share the screen. Boom. Maybe a little bit bigger, right? Yeah, I think we need a lot bigger. Right here. First point is down here. Fascinating draft from the 49ers. Went from utter boredom, no pick until number 87, to controversy, the Jake Moody pick, very quickly. And because the team already had such a strong roster, pick parameters had to revolve around maximizing 53-man roster chances of any particular selection. So this was a thinking man's draft. It wasn't a Twitter draft. You couldn't just go and name players that you liked and hope that the 49ers picked them and then hope that it would magically work out. You had to find specific puzzle pieces because most of the puzzles already assembled. So you had to find the specific puzzle pieces that matched and fit. But at the same time, you also wanted to take the best player available, but you had to reconcile those two ideas. You had to take the best player available who would make sense within the larger context of the roster. So then we go to this next thought of the thread up top, right here, highlighted. Did the 49ers improve with this draft? The short answer is probably yes, but let's see these rookies play first. Based on the picks they had, the 49ers were not going to be able to improve on the front line at any spot except for kicker. When your first pick is late in the third round, the only spot you could possibly improve a loaded roster along the front line in the draft is going to be kicker. And they picked the kicker. No surprise. They picked Jake Moody. But beyond Jake Moody, the goal was to refortify depth. So in the larger picture, now the 49ers will plug their draftees and undrafted free agents into the developmental system. Let's see how many A-listers this churns out because they have to develop A-listers, and therefore how many players the 49ers will have to pay down the road. Success or failure of the draft cannot and will not be determined this weekend. I'm going to zoom in on the offensive line and that part of the philosophy here in a second. But A-listers, this is the 49ers building strategy. I've written this 5-step process before. Acquire and develop A-listers. Pay the A-listers, the ones that you develop into A-listers when the time comes to pay them. That list can grow as the salary cap does. Don't pay the B-listers when free agency comes. Obtain comp picks through departures instead. Develop your coaching staff throughout it all, because that restocks the coaches and allows you to get more comp picks through that third round hiring incentive, and also through the comp pick restocking process, because the coaches develop the players, and then pick your next A-listers. So anyway, when we say that it's inherently difficult to find plus O linemen late in the draft, the 49ers, when they're looking to replenish frontline players. The offensive line might be more difficult than any other position group to find true frontline players, especially offensive tackle. And you look at the current state of the 49ers offensive line and the fact that they have invested big resources. Trent Williams is making record money still at left tackle. Aaron Banks was a second-round pick at left guard. The 49ers have poured a lot of money into center. Unfortunately, injuries have hurt them there. But Weston Richburg, Alex Mack, and now Jake Brendel, who has stayed healthy, can knock on wood, are part of that center position. Right guard, that was a draft pick last year. That was Spencer Burford. He's in there now. Mike McGlinchey, that was a first-round pick back in 2018. There have been a lot of resources poured into the offensive line, right? So in a draft where you're not picking until later, improving one of those positions is not going to be easy. It's not going to be a foregone conclusion. Again, you can't just throw crap against the wall in the 5th, 6th, and 7th round and expect to fix or expect to improve the issue. Now, because the 49ers have invested big resources over recent years, they have gotten better up front. We have to be a little bit smarter about the way that we talk about these quarterback injuries and not pretend that every single one of them is because the offensive line was extremely leaky. That was the furthest from the truth if we actually looked at the specifics of the injury last year. But we can say that the 49ers did lose Mike McGlinchey, who did improve as a pass protector over his time. And that right tackle is a question mark, right? Colton McKivitz and faith in him is a small part of this equation, but it's probably the main part of this equation. Over the course of several years, the 49ers have fortified a lot of these positions. They invested in right tackle Mike McGlinchey, but they decided to let him walk because he wasn't part of the A-list core. So how do they make sure that right tackle is shored up? Well, A, yes, they do have a lot of faith in Colton McKivitz. B, no, the draft probably wasn't going to be the answer for the 49ers to cross the bridge of improving beyond Colton McKivitz. A lot of people are saying, oh, well, Blake Freeland instead of the kicker, Jake Moody. Well, you might have ended up with 2 problems instead of just 1, and maybe 0 problems, because Colton McKivitz might take this position, run with it. But what if Blake Freeland struggles in pass protection, as some of his tape seems to suggest might be the case? Might struggle to anchor against NFL rushers, just like Mike McGlinchey did earlier in his career. What if you draft Blake Freeland instead of Jake Moody, and then Blake Freeland struggles in pass protection, Colton McKivitz struggles too, then you have 2 bad offensive linemen, and you have no kicker. Or you don't have a plus kicker, and a plus kicker is important to this football team. So the 49ers believe it was much more of a surefire thing that Jake Moody was going to be good. Obviously, they didn't pick somebody like Blake Freeland. He went it later on. I think he went in the 4th round. 49ers didn't go the route of an offensive lineman. And they said, you know what? We don't think anybody on the board, 5th round and forward, because that's where and beyond, that's where their picks were. We don't think anybody on the board is going to be able to immediately elevate this team. Because again, it is difficult to find plus O linemen later in the draft. So what the 49ers are doing is they're sitting back and they're relying on the construction and an investment of the offensive line that they've already done up to this point. And now they're hoping the development takes them across the finish line, does the rest of the job. And not only development, undrafted free agency too. This is where you try to find some of your hidden gems. So let's go to the roster. Let's see where the 49ers are at right now in terms of larger offensive line construction. I'm highlighting the O-line. If the season started today, you'd have Trent Williams at left tackle, Aaron Banks at left guard, Jake Brendel at center, Spencer Burford at right guard. By the way, Banks, Brendel, Burford, that's going to be the 2nd year of that interior O-line playing together. That should really help the 49ers. And they've signed a couple of veterans, and I'll talk about them in a bit. Colton McKivitz, right tackle. Matt Pryor and John Feliciano are 2 veterans. Pryor, a swing tackle. Feliciano has started a lot of games on the interior. He might challenge Spencer Burford, but if Spencer Burford takes the strides the 49ers want him to this 2nd year at right guard, then John Feliciano will play the Daniel Brunskill role. He was a good center for the New York Giants last year. Feliciano can plug in anywhere that the 49ers need him to. As I've always said, you need at least 7 quality offensive linemen to withstand a marathon of a season. Supposedly, Nick Zakelj is making some progress. We'll see just how much when training camp starts. Maybe we'll get a glimpse of it at OTAs. Will Jalen Moore push Colton McKivitz? We'll see. But this is where it gets interesting for me. The big developmental prospect at left tackle last year was the former tight end, Burford's college teammate, Leroy Watson. We'll see how much progress he made when we get back to OTAs and then the training camp. But Joey Fisher is a player the 49ers just signed out of a small school. Joey Fisher is a D2 player, but he benched more than anybody else in the draft, all offensive linemen, 40 repetitions, and his 40 time, even though he didn't run at the combine, he just ran it at his pro day, so the time might be a little bit better than it would have been on an electronic reader. 4.940 is among the fastest of all NFL offensive linemen this year. He's strong and he's fast, and the 49ers might have found an undrafted gem. Nobody in the later drafted rounds impressed them enough to pull the trigger on a pick, but somebody like Joey Fisher might be in the mix. He played right tackle in D2 in college. He might be in the mix to bolster the 49ers at that tackle spot. Arms are a little on the short side, so maybe at the guard spot. They have Il Manning out of Hawaii, who they also signed today. He's going to be more of a guard, and Corey Luciano is center depth. The free agent market does not look great for offensive linemen, so I don't know if the 49ers are going to go in that direction. But basically, they're doing what they can with the resources that they have. There is no Joe Staley in his prime growing on a first or second round tree right now that the 49ers can go and grab and add to their offensive line. Because A, that doesn't exist. Joe Staley is obviously retired. And B, the 49ers didn't have any first or second round picks. You have to work with what you have. And they're happy they don't have any first or second round picks because the reason they don't have the 2, at least, is Christian McCaffrey. They traded for him. They also traded up to get Trey Lance. So there's an opportunity cost to everything. The 49ers have been slowly but surely improving their offensive line over the years. And the next step is going to have to come in-house. That's just the reality of the situation. That's what they're doing. But I think when I illustrate it here, it's nowhere near as dire as some people would make it out to be. Again, you have 3 returners on the interior. Brendel played well last year. Aaron Banks played well last year. Burford was the worst out of those players. He has to take a step up. But John Feliciano, a veteran starter around the NFL, he's there to push him. He's there to fill in a bind. You have the best left tackle in football in Trent Williams. You do have a swing tackle now, Matt Pryor, because your old swing tackle, Colton McKivitz, is currently slated to start. McKivitz didn't play enough last year for us to firmly gauge his improvement, but the 49ers believe that it has been real. If it's not real, well, Jalen Moore, take your step up. You got to be better than you were before, and we'll see if Leroy Watson or Joey Fisher, the younger developmental prospects, can give the 49ers something at some of these O-line positions. So that's where the 49ers stand. Colton McKivitz, it's only a small part of the equation, but definitely the one that 49ers fans are focusing on most. Let me take some questions. Let's talk about this 49ers O-line. You know, the interesting thing is that last year, their pass block win rate throughout the regular season was better than it has been at any point of the Shanahan era. When they faced the really good D-lines in the playoffs, those where they started to struggle. The Cowboys and the Eagles. So that told me that the 49ers still need to take another step forward along the offensive front. The Eagles were a great example of that last year. The Chiefs were an even better example, winning the Super Bowl. The Chiefs, I mean, they retooled their whole offensive line after they got mauled in that Super Bowl against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But if you're the 49ers, again, you have to be ready for the brighter lights of the playoffs. But there's a reason that somebody like Mike McGlinchey wasn't re-signed as an A-lister. That's because the 49ers looked at their line and they said, you know what? We can get a little bit better at right tackle. Maybe Colton McKivitz is going to be a better pass protector than Mike McGlinchey. It's going to cost way less coming off a year where he entered restricted free agency. So we'll look at that option. We'll look at other options we can develop after the draft, such as Joey Fisher. So it's about patience. It's about seeing the big picture. And hopefully I illustrated some of that. Why don't we bring in a 49ers Q&A? If I have the text title, there it is. Perfect. Ken Martin thinks the 49ers have plenty of O-line. If you believe in Colton McKivitz, maybe they do. I mean, the Feliciano signing was big for this team. Re-signing Jake Brendel was big for this team, making sure they didn't lose him to the Texans. It's going to be important for Spencer Burford to take a next step so Feliciano could stay as the sixth man. It's going to be important for Aaron Banks to take yet another step so they're set at left guard. It's going to be important for Trent Williams to stay steady at age 35. And, of course, the biggest spotlight's going to be on Colton McKivitz at right tackle. But to act like this was an incompetent line is insane. They were top 8 in pass block win rate, top 8 in pass blocking score, grade, whatever way you want to look at it. They've improved over time in pass blocking. They've invested a lot in the players that I mentioned, from Trent Williams to Aaron Banks to the center position to Mike McGlinchey. I mean, that was a big investment. That was a first-round pick, and now they're looking to improve at that right tackle position. Prince Mason wants Williams, Banks, Brendel, Burford, and he's a Joey Fisher fan. He wants Joey Fisher to anchor that right side. I don't know how quickly Joey Fisher is going to develop. That's a lot of pressure on somebody coming out of a small school, but to each his own. Yep, I'm going to watch Warriors Kings. Hey, does anybody know if Top Golf in San Jose, I forgot to ask them, does anybody know if they're going to play sound at the game? Can anybody answer that question for me? They've got this massive wall of TVs. Reminds me of like the Circa Sportsbook, mini version of the Circa Sportsbook in Vegas. But I want to make sure that they're playing sound for Game 7, Warriors Kings. I guess I'm just down the street from it here in Santa Clara right now. But I think I'm going to go check it out. And if they're playing sound, I'm definitely going to be there. So if you've watched the Warriors game at Top Golf, or if you watch football Top Golf anywhere, do they play sound for big games? Or are they just going to be playing like club music? Because it's going to be a lot tougher. Now, that screen is so nice, so I really hope they're playing sound for this game. Who are the backup offensive linemen? Well, let's go back to this. This is why I make the depth chart for everyone. By the way, if you want to check it out, I'm going to put it in the comment section for you. No, I'm not going to the game. I'm not in Sacramento. I was in Sacramento for Game 5, but I'm not going to drive back up to Sacramento just for this game. Unless somebody wants to offer me tickets, I'll drive up to Sacramento right away. And if you want me to go to the game with you, you could drop it in the comment section. Drop your Twitter in the comment section, and I'll drive up to Sacramento tomorrow at any point. But yeah, shameless plug here. Jesus, who are the backup offensive linemen? Here you go. Matt Pryor, swing tackle. John Feliciano, backup guard. Keith Ishmael, backup center. Nick Zakel, backup guard. Jalen Moore, backup tackle. Yeah, who has Game 7 tickets? I don't. I had Game 5 tickets. But if somebody's got Game 7 tickets, hell, they're going to drive up to Sacramento. I'm not sure if I can classify right tackle as a need, just because I don't know, how Colton McKivitz is going to play. The 49ers seem to believe that he's going to be good. McKivitz in a limited sample size played well in pass protection last year. Problem is that sample size was like 41 snaps. They like what he did in week 17 of the Rams game. I thought he gave up a little too much pressure to be comfortable. That was obviously 2 seasons ago. To me, this is going to be an interesting mystery. We'll see. I will also note that Mike McGlinchey was never a world beater in pass protection. So perhaps the 49ers think they can get better without a huge investment in pass protection at right tackle. John's watching Game 7 on his TV, and his tickets are all ready to go. One year of experience from Burford and Banks is great for the O-line. Yes. I mean, you've got Banks now has 2 years of experience, one on the bench and one playing. Burford's got one playing because he was a rookie last year. Brendel, too. He didn't get to play extensively until last year. So Brendel, Banks, Burford, who I call the law firm on the inside, those guys are all set. Now we get to see what Colton McKivitz has. Maybe he'll surprise everyone. But the fact that 4 of the 5 positions have been stable is huge for the 49ers. There's a lot of overreaction about this offensive line without noting that 4 of the 5 positions have stayed stable. Is Poe making the 53? I have no idea. We're gonna have to see how he shows up this offseason, how he shows up this training camp. Had a nice little surge last offseason. We'll see what it looks like this year. good movement, bowling ball type of skills. All right, that's a look at the offensive line. I was only going to answer questions about the offensive line about a 20-minute show. My name is not Mike McGlinchey, by the way. The draft and the 49ers O-line construction. Everybody like the video, sub to the channel. We'll have more soon. Hopefully that really kind of got into the weeds there of the 49ers O-line depth. It's been a fun day. A lot of content, more coming very soon. Everybody take care.